Hello and welcome to the Writers Workout Conference. How awesome is this that we can gather so many authors and publishing professionals together to create free videos for you guys to watch on YouTube. How amazing is that? That's so cool. So, hi, I'm Abigail Wild. I own Wilding Publishing, and I am here to talk to you about media law and ethics, especially for authors. But first, a little bit about myself. As I said earlier, I own Wilding Publishing. Wilding Publishing basically serves to help new and debut authors get their foot in the door of the publishing industry. In a lot of ways, we are kind of a teaching publishing house where we basically take the author by the hand, give them a lot of creative control, give them a lot of information for their path, and we hope that they publish with us, but then beyond that, that it's kind of elevates their career so that they could go on to larger publishing houses. We are traditional, not hybrid, so we do not take money upfront for publishing, but we are here to guide you. I also teach in an MFA program, pretty much focusing on the business of publishing, helping students to understand their choices for their paths. I also am a part of the English faculty of Messiah University, where I teach first year students and third year students. I also run the Young Writers Workshop and Young Filmmakers Workshop for Messiah University. And so, why am I qualified to talk to you about the laws surrounding authorship, such as fair use, copyright laws, the issue of AI? I am actually in school for my next graduate degree, which is going to be in communications. And I have dug in deeply into media law as my focus for my studies. And the reason for that is because often authors come into Wilding Publishing and they aren't sure of the parameters, the guardrails that they need when concerning the law. And so I am in the midst of writing a book for authors about laws that would pertain to them. So I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of the things that you should be concerned with, that should be on your radar, so that you can step out on the right foot. And let's be honest, there are some legal and ethical issues that pop up for authors. So we'll talk about copyright law, rights to song lyric, issues with artificial intelligence, and how to safeguard your own work. I want to tackle the most important issue that it seems to be facing authors right now, something that everybody's talking about and everybody disagrees with everybody else. So I thought I would talk about it from a legal standpoint, and that is artificial intelligence. The reality is that if you use generative AI to write your book, you will not be able to copyright that book under the US Copyright Office. This is an important step for authors to protect their work. So there's generative AI and assisted AI. Assisted AI is a more ethical way to use artificial intelligence, and we're not going to talk about the environmental impacts of that. You have to follow your own ethics. However, assisted AI might be brainstorming with ChatGPT, having ChatGPT help you figure out tropes that would be good to get your message across. It can be used to help you find names, maybe create character arcs, things like that. That is assisted AI, meaning the AI is not writing the work for you. It is simply helping you, almost like a brainstorming friend. The situation is that AI is actually moving faster than laws and ethics can keep up with, which means the ethics are still not there for usage of this. So if you disagree with me that these things are unethical, then follow that for yourself. Personally, I like to read things that were completely created within an author's brain, but there are no rules against assisted AI. And that can also include proofreading and things like that. However, I would take caution because AI generally messes up verb tense and doesn't necessarily know how to use a comma correctly. So, what is generative AI? Generative AI is when you give the computer a prompt, you give ChatGPT or Claude a prompt, and it spits out a book for you. And so, we've seen all of these kind of publishing companies that are coming out of the woodwork saying, oh, we can publish you, we're going to use AI to do it. So, we'll create an AI book based on your prompts. Okay. And they think this is a great shortcut into the publishing industry. I also see a lot of like master classes about writing your children's book on AI. And all you have to do is just type in your prompt and it will give you a story. None of those works can be copywritten under the US copyright law. And the reason for that is because they are a learning model, which means they are taking works that have been uploaded to it and spitting it back out in different ways for other people. So anything that you put in, you could be plagiarizing without even realizing it. In fact, there are a group of authors, both fiction and nonfiction, who have joined in a class action lawsuit against ChatGPT for this very reason. These authors include George R. R. Martin, Jodi Picoult, John Grisham, Sylvia Day, Jonathan Franzen, Ellen Hildebrand, David Baldacci. The Authors Guild has picked up on this with this quote. It is imperative that we stop this theft in its tracks, or we will destroy our incredible literary culture, which feeds many other creative industries in the US. And that was by the Authors Guild CEO, Mary Rassenberger. She also went on to say, great books are generally written by those who spend their careers and indeed their lives learning and perfecting their arts. To preserve our literature, authors must have the ability to control if and how their works are used by generative AI. The problem is that these authors have not given permission for their works to be used to train ChatGPT. You should always have the right to choose what happens to your manuscript. So it is perfectly okay to ask publishing companies that you may think about working with if they have an AI policy. In fact, Wild Ink has an AI policy. And it is now a part of our contracts that there is no AI, generative AI used. Now, that asks, then what are the ethical ways to use AI? It is a new technology. The cat's out of the bag. It's not going anywhere. Like I said, you can use it as a brainstorming partner. You can use it as a way to kickstart research. Just make sure that you know where that research is going to. Use it to learn and then go out onto the website, look up scholarly information, look up professional information, and look up other information based on the searches that you did or the queries that you did. This is something we're all going to have to learn how to manage. Um, but if you figure out what your own ethical guardrails are before entering into this, you will be much better off. Just understand that you should ask your publishing companies what is going to be done with your manuscript concerning AI. There have been a number of even large publishing houses who have sold manuscripts to AI companies as a way to train AI. You can certainly go to the Authors Guild for more information on that. To me, your authentic voice as an author is a most spectacular thing. It is magic. It is not something that AI can create, that soul, that heart. It just isn't. And as for copyright law, it is seen as plagiarism, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Well, let's go on to talk about intellectual property. Intellectual property is the work that you do, your writing, your book cover design. That is your intellectual property. Social media is a huge way to advertise. It is electronic word of mouth, and it is so effective for authors to be on social media to build their communities of readers, right? I've seen a number of things come up because to create your social media posts and your TikTok videos and your shorts, it is so easy to fall into intellectual property theft without even realizing it. So I want to give you a heads up about what is allowed and what is not allowed. First and foremost, let's talk about TikTok music. I know that TikTok is under threat of going away, but we don't know where it's going to land. So I just need to address this just in case. When you are doing something like marketing your book on TikTok, even if it's a video that you're not putting up for boost or for ad revenue, you are just putting a video out there for your book. You have to make sure to use sounds that are available for business purposes only. You cannot use trending sounds. You cannot use, say, Taylor Swift songs. You cannot use any song that would have copyright eligibility. So you have to make sure to use sounds that are royalty free and available for businesses. When you get onto TikTok or other places, you can look specifically for these sounds. But please be careful because if you use, say, a Taylor Swift song, you might get away with it. Or you might not, because that is actually a copyright violation. And because you are essentially marketing something that is going to be for sale or is for sale, Taylor Swift could, by law, come back to you and ask for a piece of your revenue. And I have to tell you that the cost of that is astronomical and it is not worth it. And it's not fun because we love Taylor Swift. We love all of these songs. We want to use them because for so many authors, they were an inspiration for parts of their books, right? We all have playlists, we all have things like that. They are important. Music is important. However, you have to respect the intellectual property of the songwriter or recording artist. So you cannot use anything that is not given to TikTok or anything as a sound that a business can use. At the same time, social media graphics for Twitter and things like this, you have to make sure that the imagery you use is available to you as royalty free. There are all sorts of laws and things against using some. So if you do a Google search and find an image in that Google search that you would like to use to talk about your book on social media, you can't do that because you don't have the copyright to it. You cannot do that. So you're going to have to look at places like Pexels, Unsplash, deposit photos. You can use Canva photos, things like that. You can use those, but please don't just pull images from a Google search. Also, at the same time, do not use photos or the likeness of celebrities for promotions of your book. They could by law, come to you and ask for a part of your revenue. And I guarantee what the part that they're asking for is probably more than you would make off of the sale of each book. It's just not worth it. And it is actually against the law. This next one is going to sting. It is absolutely going to sting because so many authors do this. So many manuscripts that we get in have this element. And I understand why people do this because people who came before them wrote some amazing things like poetry and song lyrics, and they just sing to your heart and sing to the soul of what your book is. However, please don't use song lyrics in your novel, short stories, poetry, or poetry of other people. Try to weigh heavily on your own creativity. Why? Because works created after January 1st, 1978 has a protection that lasts the life of the author plus 70 years. They have copyright protection. So what you could do is find things that are within the public domain to use, but you can't use those Taylor Swift lyrics. I keep saying Taylor Swift. I guess she's on my mind today. Just any recording artist. You cannot use something that is not in the public domain. And I have found that a lot of authors don't actually know this. And they think, well, this is like good advertisement for that artist. And the reality is that then it is their intellectual property and technically it's theft. I'm sorry. One thing that I see coming up on social media all the time is that, oh, you used the same title as another author. That's a copyright violation. The reality is that you cannot copyright a title. According to Wang IP law, the US Copyright Office views book titles as short slogans, not intellectual property. The underlying theory to this is that there may be other instances where the same or similar title is equally appropriate. So you cannot get into trouble if you use a title that somebody else used by the law. Now let's talk about your First Amendment rights. Of course, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And that is, of course, Constitutional Amendment number 1. The First Amendment right protects your intellectual freedoms without government interference or censorship. This affords you the right to write about controversial matters, political issues, and sensitive topics. This also means that the government cannot come in and take away your right to write about these things. Your work, whether you are writing LGBTQIA, whether you're writing about marginalized peoples, your work is protected under the First Amendment. There are a number of cases that set this up. First of all, you can research them. Grove Press, Inc. versus Gerstein, 1964. This is when Tropic of Cancer was written by Henry Miller, and there was an outcry that it was indecent. While it was considered groundbreaking, it was also considered indecent and controversial. It was argued that Tropic of Cancer holds high literary merit and that the obscene parts were necessary for artistic expression. This went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court deemed that it was not obscene because it had redeeming social value. Overall, the Supreme Court overturned that ruling. Press Inc. versus Gerstein in 1964 led the way for publishers and authors to be able to write and publish a wider array of works. This means that we can produce romance, erotica without fear from the federal government stepping in. This also means that you can write and publish sapphic novels, which is so huge right now. And this is something to keep in mind when groups like Moms for Liberty are trying to change the laws, are trying to change the fact that you are able to write those works. They do not have a standing, but that does not mean that you have to become complacent. You still have to fight for your work. In the case Campbell versus Acuff Rose music, we look at parody. And parody is something that novelists do quite often. I love parodies, they're hilarious. This case involved Roy Orbison's Oh Pretty Woman and Two Live Crew's version of it entitled Pretty Woman in 1989. Acuff Rose tried to sue Two Live Crew for under saying that Roy Orbison's song was protected by the First Amendment. So then the question is, what is parody? Under fair usage law, parody is safe as it relates to the First Amendment. Justice Souter noted that a parody's commercial character is only one element to be weighed in a fair use inquiry, and that insufficient consideration was given to the nature of the parody in weighing the degree of copying. So what does that mean? Essentially, they deemed that Two Live Crew's version held literary merit. It held artistic merit, creative merit on its own, which is how Weird Al Yankovic can get away with what he does because it holds its own artistic merit. And so to parody something, you have to make sure that you are bringing something new. The difference is what the author brings to the table. Do they change it enough? And does it have its own creative merit? Did the author manipulate the story in such a way that inputs their own intellectual creativity and works to the story? Now, it is kind of murky waters with this because fan fiction could technically be a part of this. However, you do have to bring your own literary merit to it. And Wild Ink doesn't publish parody works just because it is kind of murky legal ground. Now, the case of Near versus Minnesota in 1931. This was about Minnesota's The Saturday Press, where they would produce articles that were critical of politicians. And why does this protect novelists and publishing houses? It protects us from government censorship before the work is even published. It also helps to protect authors and publishing houses from the government coming in and saying that their works are objectionable. which helps romance and erotica authors, but also LGBTQIA authors. While no bookstore or library has to carry every single book, you are free to write and publish what you would like. Next thing I want to talk about is libel. Libel can be found in every industry and every social situation. It can also be a pitfall for many authors, so listen up. Whether you are writing a memoir or you are doing social media posts or you utter some things on a podcast or in a TikTok that maybe you shouldn't. This just asks you to pay attention to your words and be very intentional about what you say and where you got the inspiration for your characters. Simply put, if somebody says something publicly, and it might be false about another person, that person's reputation is damaged and the charge of libel can be made. It's a type of defamation that is published, so social media counts as publishing here and can ruin the person's reputation. You could be sued for that. So, we all like to formulate our antagonist after somebody who did us wrong. Be careful when you tell people where you got the inspiration that you use no names and know also that you use nothing that would let people in your life know exactly who you're talking about. Obviously, we write what we know, and so we do bring in our own life experiences. And while this is something that is mostly of concern for nonfiction authors and memoir authors, this can also affect fiction authors as well, especially on social media. So turning your ex into a villain can be soul cleansing, right? You have to be careful to change the character enough so that when the people in your life or the people in that person's life reads it, they would never see that person. And we are fictionalizing real events. However, facts are not story, right? Facts are a collection of real life people, places, and events. While a story is a work of fiction, plot, plan, the story removes itself from real life situations that originally prompted you to write. So, for example, I wrote The Art of Drowning surrounding something that happened to my son. I changed my son into my main character, and she's a girl. So the social situations changed. The reason this happening occurred changed, and the people surrounding the main character changed. I took the essence of the people who hurt my son and put it into that and spun new characters out of it. That keeps me safe from libel. So, in other words, the person that inspired the character may be here on Earth or the International Space Station, as it were. The real life person is just the beginning thought. In other words, you have to depart from fact. You have to take that beginning kind of nuance of that person and blow it up into fiction. The Help was embroiled in this, the novel The Help by Catherine Stockett. Okay, so Abilene Cooper versus Catherine Stockett. In the novel, Stockett uses the likeness of her family's nanny without the nanny's permission to create Abilene Clark. There were too many similarities to Abilene Cooper, who was the real person who inspired the story, and it could not be ignored. While the court case was dropped due to the statute of limitations having been passed, it is a stain on the novel. So why can't you just write exactly what happened? Well, libel and defamation. And let's be honest, this is okay because life rarely fits into Freytag's model or Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. So to write exactly in a fiction novel exactly what happened is actually bad, both legally and creatively. If you base your villain on your mother, and the mother is in the story is obviously your mother, and you didn't ask for her permission, you might have a problem legally. And let's face it, life events rarely make good reading experiences in fiction because life is messier than fiction. It's a mess. So the author's role in telling stories is to enrapture the reader with storytelling technique. Life rarely follows technique, right? So my personal advice to authors is to take that little nugget of truth and blow it up into something huge that is no longer resembling your mother, your ex, or your boss. Change everything. Change genders. Change names. Change situations. Change facts. Know how they made you feel. Keep the pain. Keep the confusion. Build the pain and confusion into a story. Build a new character off of those emotions. But what if a podcaster asks you what your inspiration was? Never say name. Never even allude to who it is. Don't even say these things happened in your life. Doing so can lead that person to your book, and you could end up in a bad situation legally. If you give anybody a whiff of what you wrote having a kernel of truth, people will figure out the basis, and it will get back to that person who wronged you, and they could sue you for creating a story that is about them, even though it is fiction. And let's be honest, if you have a book that was well written, readers will want to dig in to find more. And the fact of the matter is, if they figure out you've written about your mother or you've written about your ex, they may think everything in the book is something your mother or your ex did. So, so how can you answer that question? And it will come up. It will come up. Here are some suggestions for you. Say something like, I noticed how bad bullying is on social media, and I felt like it should be addressed. I see the pain behind a battered woman's eyes, and I want to write a story to offer strength. I understand the pain of an abused child, and I want to offer help. Substance abuse is a major problem, and I wanted to write a book going through it. Or I wanted, subject, teens, mothers to feel seen. Now, anybody who knows me knows that I speak openly about the inspiration for my book. That's because I asked permission of the people who are in my books to be able to talk about them in interviews and social media. All other characters are made up. If you can ask permission, do so. If you cannot fictionalize, well then, facts only serve as inspiration. So to protect yourself when talking about your book on social media, focus on the fiction, not the real life. If you are writing nonfiction, make sure to get the facts correct. Jericho writers note that the burden of proof lies with the defendant. So in nonfiction, you must prove that what you're writing is true. Another quote from Jericho writers, this is because libel laws are meant to compensate people for damage done to their reputations. They're not meant to punish someone for lying. This is why all copyrights read this story, all names, characters, and incidences portrayed in this production are fictitious, no identification of actual persons, living or deceased, places, buildings, and products is intended or should be inferred. Watch your innuendos, watch your hints about who it might be you're writing about, because that could also end up in a libelous situation. Once a person is deceased, their privacy expires by law. You might want to wait to publish your book because, as Jericho writer says, individuals, be they descendants or not, can have grounds for a suit if they believe that their reputations have been marred by the statement as well, unless the statute of limitations has occurred. And that is the same as what happened with Abigail Cooper versus Catherine Stockett. Another book that was caught up in legal proceedings is The Red Hat Club, Vicky Stewart versus Haywood Smith and St. Martin's Press. Vicky Stewart claimed that a character in The Red Hat Club resembled her. This was settled out of court, reaching an undisclosed agreement. Fictionalize your truth when writing a novel. Truth is larger than any one person. Another thing to be concerned about is false light. This is the legal claim often grouped with defamation, although they are distinct. False light involves somebody being portrayed in a way that is misleading and offensive, even if the statement or portrayal isn't outright false, which means you could write about your mother and everything's true and she could get you on false light. Unlike libel or slander, false light doesn't necessarily require proof that the statement was untrue, only that it created a highly offensive impression and caused harm to the person's reputation or emotional well-being. False light focuses on misleading portrayal or implication, not necessarily proving falsehood. Defamation, such as libel or slander, requires proving false statement that damages somebody's reputation. Not all states in the US recognize false light as a claim, but where it is recognized, it's a distinct way to address harm caused by a public misrepresentation. So what are the key takeaways for authors from this talk if you got the whole way through it? First of all, rely on your own creativity for writing your book. Set up guardrails for yourself for AI usage, making sure that you're using it in an ethical way. And remember that you cannot copyright works that were created and generated by AI. Also, you should not use images and sounds that you find just on TikTok or on Google searches. You have to make sure the images and sounds that you use are royalty free and that you are allowed to, by copyright law, use these. Also, when you are fictionalizing things that happened in your life, be sure to change the people. Change them so you're not sued for libel or anything like that. Remember, focus in on that kernel of truth and blow it up into fiction. Then do not go onto social media saying exactly where you got your inspiration. Make up something, have something in your mind that you're ready to say when people on podcasts or interviews ask you these questions. Have a generic statement in mind because otherwise you could be entering into defamation or false light. I went through a lot. Thank you for sticking with me. I enjoyed this time. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to the Writer's Workout to send me questions. I'm happy to answer them. I am not a lawyer. I'm just someone who is studying media law and ethics. Okay. Happy writing, everybody. Keep yourself safe. Bye.